In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. So, it was a while ago, I was driving in my car, and I tend to keep, whether it's like a gift certificate for food or water or a granola bar in my car when I go into the city, because I know I'm going to encounter someone at a stoplight that is going to be hungry or be asking for food or something or money. And I always felt it was better to give someone food or something that could be exchanged for food rather than giving them cash. And I want to recall two different occasions. One, I had given a power bar to a particular man at one of the exits on 290, and he was very grateful, and he looked at it, and before he walked away from my car, he was already eating it. And he's like, "God bless you, thank you," and he just tore it open and started eating it as if it was his first meal in a long time. I also remember being in the car one day driving and getting onto the Eisenhower at one exit and waiting to turn left to go west on 290. And there was a man standing there, and he said food or, food, whatever, job, money needed. And I gave him a bottled water that was in my car that I was going to drink at some point, and it was a bottled water. So I gave it to him, and it was in my car. And he grabbed it, and he looked at it, and he said, "Do you have any ice for this?" And I said, "No." I said, I'm not driving with ice. I said, "Do you want the water?" And he's like, "Well, it'd be nice if it was cold." And I thought, wow, that's really not, thirst has really not hit the system if he's worried about the temperature of the water. And I was thinking, too, I was going to drink that water. I didn't think it was that warm. I mean, or, like boiling water or something. But I was thinking about that and thinking about today's gospel reading, and we can get into our heads that all homeless people or all people in need are dirtbags, or they're drug addicts, or they're crazy. And that's not always the case. I mean, yes, there are a lot of people who have some type of mental disability. They have some type of addiction that has caused them to lose their home or their job, or unable to hold down a job or a home. But that's not always the case. Now, if you take what we've done this past week in collecting, and you'll see it when you go into the multipurpose room, making kits for people who are transitioning from being homeless to having a home. Now, you might think, well, does that actually happen? Do people go from being homeless to having a home? And I want you to think of a completely different scenario. Because when we see people that are homeless or on the streets, many times we think, oh yeah, they're crack addicts, or they're psychotic or whatever. But I want you to think about the fact that Hesed House, which is the place where we're going to be taking these kits later today, had 279 residents last weekend. And out of the 279, 53 of them were children, little children. So you think, what do these little children do? Are they addicted to something? Are they psychotic? Are they having a hard time holding a job? No, they're along for the bumpy ride. They're along for the difficulties in life. But are all the homeless people in these shelters, are they all drug addicts? Are they all psychotic? Are they all have some type of inability or personality disorder? No. What I want you to think about, and that's been one of the things that has been discussed in this upcoming election, is really what people make an hour to live. And if you think about it, if you were at a disadvantage, say you came from an area where you didn't have the money, your grades weren't that great because you had to work through school, and you didn't have enough educational chops, if you want to call it that, to get a scholarship for college. Or the fact is everything that you made went back into your household to help support your parents who were immigrants, or someone had some physical illness that soaked up all the money in the household. Now, you know what it costs to have health insurance. You know what it costs to get sick. You know, when you go to the doctor's office, it's not free by any means. And you know medications for those who are elderly, most people who are elderly will choose starvation over their medication, which is a huge problem for the elderly in our country, that they now are malnourished because they can't afford to buy food because they have to buy their medications. But for the person who struggles and works a job that pays barely minimum wage, how can they always make it? How can you afford to live? And many of these people that are in Hesed House and all these other homeless shelters throughout the country are not just people who are mentally ill or addicted to something. They're people that were struggling just to make ends meet. And then what happens? What if a physical illness happens and they don't have time off of work? They get paid by the hour. How do they pay for it? How do they contend with those things that are expensive, that can cost thousands and thousands of dollars? Now, in a network of people, we see now that there's these caring pages and there's these GoFundMes for people who have extreme deficits in their finances because of health reasons. And people and friends many times will support that. But many times those people have already insurance. But for the person who doesn't have insurance, what do? How do they start? And you know from those of you who have insurance, your insurance company negotiates how much they're going to pay the doctor. If you don't have insurance, you're stuck with whatever the doctor says. You don't have negotiating power. You're not Aetna, you're not Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I'm not saying this to give us an education on medical expenses, but I want you to think as a whole and not think like the rich man in today's gospel reading, who saw Lazarus at the gate, who had sores, so that meant he was ill, he had infections, he was starving. He was at the gate, and he said, that guy, he's crazy, or he's an addict, or he's mean to his family, he deserves to be there, and I'm going to overlook him, and I'm just going to go every day and enjoy my life and forget about figuring out or even just looking past whatever his scenario is and just helping out of our abundance. He didn't do that. Lazarus looked past him, and everyone in Lazarus' household knew, or the rich man's household knew Lazarus. That's why at the end of the gospel reading, we hear that the rich man says, send Lazarus to my 5 brothers and tell them, because they already knew. They were already ignoring him. They were already looking past him. They were already driving past and saying, oh, there's that guy again. Now, I'm not saying that we should be foolish or sacrifice our safety in helping those who are in need, but there are avenues for us to do that. And what I want to say today, too, is I want to thank all of you for continually responding when we do these kits, whether they're mission kits, whether they're these health kits that we've done, the cleanup kits that we've sent all over the world, and now with these new home kits for people who are transitioning out of Hesed House into actual apartments. And one of the stories of one of the girls who was in Hesed House was a teenager. And she now had got a job while she was in the housing there in Hesed House. She got a job, she worked, she went back to school, continued to work, and now one of these kids probably is going to go to her for her new apartment that she has as she works and goes back to school. So there are the stories there. There are the people who are transitioning. But what we have to understand is as we help others, and as you do this ministry to help our church as a whole make a presence and help these people in need, is that we can't be judgmental when we give. And we can't say, well, you know, I'm going to give, but these people are probably going to waste it, or they're going to whatever. And that's not the mentality that we should ever have. And I know that for many of you, that's not the mentality that you have. You are helping. You are buying things, you are bringing them and dropping them off, because that is the way that you can show love for those in need. But I want to remind you, too, that we can't ever just look past and say, I don't want to see the need that's in front of me, whether that's the need of a homeless person or some ministry in the church, or if that's the need of the church itself. We can't look past and say, I'm not going to even look at it. I'm just going to ignore it and hope it goes away, because it won't go away. And as Christ saw the woman come in and she put those 2 coins in the tray in the back of the church, and as Christ saw her, and she was a widow, and she put the 2 coins in, and Christ said to her something that is very important for all of us to remember. He said, she didn't give that money from her abundance. She gave it from her poverty. Now think of that. She didn't give out of her abundance. This is what's left over, let me give it. She gave out of her poverty. Out of her poorness, she gave to the church to do the church's work. Now, I'm not saying that you go sell your house and donate everything and live on the street and become one of those extremists who feel that, I need to give everything away in order to make a difference. No, but somewhere in between of our abundance and our poverty is where we should be thinking about how are we making a difference. And not just with the things that we give, but the abundance of our time. But the abundance of time that, now I'm not saying that don't watch the games or don't be a sports fan, but in moderation, we have to have the moderation. Can we wait in a line or wait in traffic for 2 hours to get home? Or do we begrudge a church service because it's an hour long? So that in between, we have to have that moderation and say the abundance of our time. How much time do we have? I know for the festival this weekend, many of you have offered to give of your time. Some of you have not. And some of you choose to support the festival. Some of you choose not to support the festival. This isn't about hammering anybody one way or the other. This is just to ask you to consider the abundance of your time, the abundance of where you're going to eat this weekend, the abundance of can you take some of the cards and give it to people that you know in your neighborhood and ask them to support the church. Because all these things help, and they're very easy things to do. They're very simple. How hard is it to say to your neighbor, hey, our church has a festival, you should come see the beauty of the inside of our church and taste the food that is handmade with love to support the mission of our church. Everybody has to eat, but to think and consider this whole range of our time, our talent, and our treasures, which we're going to be talking about in a few weeks with stewardship. But what is our time? Can we give more to the church? Can we give more to the projects of the things happening around us that are good and beneficial for God's glory? Can we give more of our finances to help those in need, to help the ministry of the church? Can we give more of our talents? And we might be saying, well, what are our talents? Well, a lot of you sing from the pews, but you're not up in the choir loft. A lot of you do your own little fundraisers on your own, but you're not part of the Philiptikos. A lot of you have other ministries and things that you do and programs, but you don't have your kids in the youth programs. So try and have a balance. Try and do just a little bit more. And in doing more, when we come to God and God says, there was a sick man at your gate. The church was in need. The church needed this. The homeless shelter needed that. And do you know what? You did it. I mean, how wonderful would that be to hear from God saying, when the church had a need, when the church requested, and when those around you were hurting, you stopped to help. And that's not just in the context of our church either. That's in the context of people in your families, the friends that are around you. Do you stop to listen and offer them a kind word back, or just offer them an ear and just listen to what the problems or the issues are, and to be supportive and careful, caring to them so that they can feel that they're loved? These are all things that this gospel reading reminds us. And like I said, you're here today. You're doing the work. You've given to these projects. You are helping with the festival, and you're doing all these things. So this is not, again, a negative, by any means, shot to anyone. It's just a reminder to us that these things matter. And everything that you do matters. Every little thing, every big thing. And if we can do the little things over and over, then we can get to doing the big things. You know, miracles that we ask for in our life are small, and they're every day, and they're happening to us. But many times we're expecting the big one, the big, big miracle. What is that big miracle going to be? But look at all the small ones in our lives that are around us and take inventory of them. And as you recognize them, you will recognize the bigger ones that come in your life as well, and the bigger ones that are in people's lives around us. So continue to do what God has called you to do, to give of yourself, not out of your extreme poverty, not out of your abundance, but somewhere in between. And that somewhere in between is to give out of love. Amen.